Hello everyone, I'm Ricardo Tenori, and today we're going to answer the question, is the Cross comic book series for you? This is an extreme horror comic book series, kind of like a zombie apocalypse, except instead of the zombie virus making you brain dead, it kind of brings out the worst in you. They are pretty much rabid. If you've seen the movie The Crazies, that's very similar to what this kind of story is about. It's just like people losing their minds and just enacting just the worst out of humanity. It's terrifying. Cross does not mess around. Content warning for anyone that's interested. This story has violence, depravity, just any taboo that you can think of. It's definitely not for the faint of heart. Please just don't bother with them. The Walking Dead is similar in the survival aspect, but if you could not handle The Walking Dead or anything like that, don't read this. Just don't bother. This is for extreme horror fans. This is definitely not the worst horror series I've read. Yeah, not the worst. But it's definitely disturbing and pulpy, and it's just not going to be everyone's cup of tea. It's over the top to the max. It's trying to freak you out. It's trying to disturb you in any way, and it's just not for everyone. This one's the first volume written by Garth Ennis. It's definitely the one that feels the most inspired. It's about this guy who starts off at a diner, and then the outbreak happens, and then he meets up with a bunch of survivors throughout the story, and they pretty much are migrating to someplace that's cold so they can be safe from the infected. This first volume is definitely the one I would start off with. It has great twists and turns, great characters. It definitely feels like a story that hasn't reached the level of craziness that the later books in the series kind of reach. So I haven't read all the Cross books. I've only read a handful. I feel like I fucking bought enough to where I can say I'm a fan. I've read 4 series. I'll talk about them one-on-one, just so you can get a scope of kind of like the variety that there is. Because Cross is written by multiple artists spanning multiple volumes and multiple issues. This first one I'll start off with. It's the shortest I have. It's Cross 3D. It is in 3D. It has 3D glasses. Here, let me fucking pull them out. There they are. You get like adorable Cross 3D glasses. Oh yeah, one thing I forgot to mention is that the infection, it gives you a cross rash on your head, and that's how you know who's infected. And I think it's kind of adorable that they put a cross on these stupid 3D glasses. This 3D is... it's about as good as you think it is. You know, it's not going to blow your mind. The actual story is as basic as can get. It's about a bunch of soldiers that are in a city and shit's going down. I don't even remember much about it, to be honest. It's kind of forgettable. It's fun. You know, I feel like that's some of the Cross stories. You're going to have fun with it, and you may or may not remember them. So this is Cross Volume 13, Badlands, and this one has 2 stories in it. One where this friend group living in Japan, or they're just hanging about, and then the Cross come and fuck everything up. This girl in the friend group, her dad is in the Yakuza, and he's kind of overprotective and kind of a piece of shit to her. And then there's like a guy that like has a crush on the girl, and without getting into spoilers, things kind of go from there. Just all hell breaks loose. And the other story is one where it's these guys in prison that have to break out, and the Cross come. And to be honest, I feel like the prison one is shorter, but I feel like the prison one kind of gets to the point faster. It's more entertaining, and I like the art better. But this one's not bad. But this one's definitely one of the schlockiest, like goofiest out of them all, because you do get a wide spectrum of stories, and this one's definitely more leaning towards the camp. This one is Crossed Volume 3, Psychopath, and this one I'm a little iffy on. It's about this psychopath that befriends this group of people, and he like picks them off one by one throughout the entire story. Just does horrible things. This is just not that much fun. It's like Cross Volume 13. This was like camp. But the art is incredible. It's just not my cup of tea. Cross Psychopath definitely pushes a little too many boundaries, just for me personally. It's just trying to gross out the reader as much as possible. There isn't a lot of humanity in this story, which I feel like is the plus side to some of these cross books. There is a level of humanity and commentating on the worst of humanity, but this one is literally just like depravity and just it's uncomfortable. If you do want a book that'll disturb you, this is the one. Definitely just it's icky. I felt like I wanted to take a shower after I read it. Now, the last story that I'll talk about is Crossed, Wish You Were Here. Definitely the longest out of all the stories that I've read, and it's one of the best. It's one of the best besides the very first volume. I do like the first volume better because I feel like it gets to the point more and the pacing is faster. This one is definitely more in-depth. The story is about a guy who lives on an island with a bunch of other survivors, and they all have different dynamics, and the story cuts between the past and the present. And the main character is pretty much just writing a journal telling his side of the story. The main character is definitely not someone to look up to, but by reading his story, you do understand where he kind of comes from. Not that it justifies his actions, because the story leads up to something that genuinely is horrifying, and you understand why other characters kind of don't like him. The main character is definitely kind of a scumbag. He's an interesting character that you don't like, but you follow him throughout the entire story, and it's fascinating. Having four entire volumes dedicated to this story, you do get a lot of depth with the main character. You do get a lot of surprises and payoffs that you can't really do in a single volume. The story does have characters that are over the top, but they do feel grounded in some sort of way because you do feel like you've gotten to know them. Psychopath fails because you feel like you don't really get to know any of the characters that horrible things are happening to. The main character you get to know, but that's it. The other characters are pretty basic and bare bones. Whereas Wish You Were Here, you get like 4 volumes of getting to know these survivors. I definitely do recommend Wish You Were Here after the first volume because I feel like this has the depth that the other stories don't. I do think it overstays its welcome just a little bit, but I do think it's a good read, and I recommend it if you're a Crossed fan. So pros and cons for the Crossed series. For pros, I think the disturbing situational horror of the survivors is definitely the draw for me personally. The disturbing nature, just like trying to shock the reader as much as possible. Like, I don't really care about any of that. For me, it's just like, what would I do in this situation? And that stuff is scary to me, and I feel like that's the feeling that makes Crossed work. Now for cons, I feel like there is a repetition throughout the entire series. Like the first volume and Wish You Were Here have very similar protagonists, and the entire series kind of has like the same thesis. You have the Cross, which that virus brings out the worst in humanity, but you could also say the same for the survivors. The survivors do horrible things to each other, like in Psychopath. Like the main character, he's technically a survivor, but he picks off other survivors for the sake of his own fun. That's something that lasts throughout the entire series, this basic thesis statement where it's like, yes, we get it, humanity can be awful. And at best, it's really thought-provoking. But that's only a small part of this series. It's mainly camp, it's mainly schlock. That's a big drawback from the Cross series. After you've read one, you feel like you've read them all, basically. So I do recommend it for horror fans if you do want to get into it. If you like The Walking Dead, this is just a more extreme version of that. But if you could not handle The Walking Dead, just don't touch this. Just don't do it at all. This is definitely one of the most disturbing books you will ever read. So check it out if you want to check it out, and don't say I didn't warn you, because holy fuck, I tried. But if you're into that, have fun.